Hi there, everybody. I am Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the show here today. Just this past week, we've had the luxury of getting a brand new Rolling Stones album, which is, of course, Hackney Diamonds. And in listening to this album and reviewing it and just thinking about the cool concept of a band like this, who have been around since the early 60s, still making new music in 2023 when they're all roughly around 80 years old, right? And making albums that are fresh and exciting and new. And it got me to thinking, well, we've actually been pretty lucky over the last bunch of years that a lot of our favorite bands from the 70s, the 60s in this case, but the 70s, the 80s, even the early 90s, are still taking the time, feeling the creative juices, and going into the studio to create new music for all of us long-standing fans. And whether you, loyal viewer, are someone who actively goes out and listens to these new works from these bands or not, just think about that concept of a band who's been around for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, who have released probably, what is considered their classic albums a long time ago, fully knowing that most people won't accept any of their newer releases as classics, right? But still wanting to go out there and give it a go anyway. Because I always stop to think, and I always ponder this whole thing of, what makes a classic album. A classic album from 1972, like, no, speaking of the Stones, no one will deny that Sticky Fingers is a classic album, right? But did we really know it was a classic album in 1972, 73, right? By the 80s, we certainly did. Maybe even by the late 70s, we certainly did. Of course, we do today. So, who's to say that Hackney Diamonds, 20 years from now, might be looked at as, not only a great comeback for the Stones, their first studio album of all new material in quite some time, but maybe it sits pretty highly up in their catalog. Someone asked me a question the other day. It's like, well, Pete, where would you put Hackney Diamonds in the ranking of all their albums? I don't know. I've had it a week, right? It's like, it's going to take more time than that. Just like, when Some Girls came out, it's not like a week later I was going to know exactly where I'd rank it in their catalog. You need time with these things, right? Because some of these albums aren't, they can't be deemed a classic today, right? Years from now, maybe. A lot of the albums we deem as classic now, back in the day, they were just like, oh, it was a good album, right? It was a hit album. We weren't calling them classics. Hotel California wasn't deemed a classic a week after its release or even a year after its release. All these years later, sure, the legacy is built up. So I think this whole idea of, in a weird music industry that we have today, and it is weird, we have a lot of, first of all, rock music is not considered like the hip happening thing, right? That is, and for a lot of us, folks of a certain age, that's hard to accept, right? That most of the music that's deemed popular, that's listened to by younger people and, pushed through social media is are bands and things that are not this, which I'm going to talk about today. Bands and old time bands that I'm going to talk about today who are still creating good new music. But we see things like dance music and hip hop and rap and electronic music and just kind of indie pop music and things like that, right? But rock bands don't get pushed into the limelight anymore now. Will they at some point in time? Possibly. Rock always comes back. Rock always comes back. Many people will say the glory years of rock music is kind of dead, and that could be true. That could be true. But it all depends on what we as consumers want to hear and want to embrace. But I think in order to keep rock music alive, I think it's really important that the old favorites, the classic artists from yesterday, still participate in creating new music, because that keeps not only the names of these bands out there, but it's also good for the industry itself. when the old guard is not just stepping away and fading off into the sunset, right? And even though in a lot of instances, some of these bands who have been around forever, they may not have all their original members or their classic members. Maybe they've died, maybe they've gone on to other things, right? So you have these kind of handicap lineups. But in most cases, they're still trying to create music that is traditionally trying to sound like the band, like we expect them to sound. I think even though you may lose a couple of members, if you're still creating music that sounds like what people come to know and want and love from you, I think that's a good thing. And that's hopefully, giving something back to the fans, saying, we want to continue to bring to you new music that hopefully gives you those warm and fuzzy feelings and remind you of why you've always listened to us in the past, right? So, of course, Hackney Diamonds, that's my first example. So, totally sounds like a Stones album. Totally sounds like a Stones album. Yeah, they've got 2023 production values, and some people like that, some people don't, whatever. But it rocks, catchy songs. I'm all good with that. Whether you like it or not, Ozzy Osbourne, Patient Number 9. It's only, as unbelievable it is for the Stones to be putting out new albums that sound pretty exciting. I mean, Ozzy, we all know the issues that Ozzy's having, physically and whatnot. So the fact that Patient Number 9 is even halfway good is a really good thing. I'm surprised how much I like a good chunk of this album, right? Judas Priest, Firepower. We got a new one coming up from them in a couple months, in early 2023. This. Who would know? Who would have thought that Judas Priest would have come out with an album this good, so late in the game? Terrific, terrific album. Kansas. Steve Walsh retires from the band. They bring in Ronnie Platt. Their last 2 studio albums sound like vintage Kansas. Back to playing this American progressive rock they've always been known for, with a really good vocalist. They go out live. Ronnie can sing any of the songs from the catalog and sing it well. God bless him, we love Steve Walsh, but for the last 25 plus years when he was in the band, he had a really hard time singing a lot of the catalog. His voice was shot. Now the band can go out and be Kansas once again. The Guess Who. Really good album. Yeah, it's, we can grumble about who's in the band, right? It's the original drummer and a bunch of other guys, right? But it's a really good album. Does it sound like vintage Guess Who? Man, maybe not, but it's a good music with the Guess Who name on it. Trevor Rabin, of course, the guitarist and vocalist from Yes for the 90125 era of the band, right? Comes back with a brand new studio album just recently of all new material with vocals, great musicianship on here. It's terrific. Trevor, it's great to have you back. Speaking of Judas Priest, KK Downing, right? Comes out of retirement. Puts together KK's Priest along with Tim Ripper Owens and company. Man, Sinner Rides Again. It's a really good metal album. Really good for metal fans. Why not, right? A little more obscure band, but still no less impressive. Cirith Ungol. Great band, formed in the 70s. Had a little bit of success as a kind of like an underground heavy metal band in the 80s. Dark Parade is the new album. Just terrific. So good. It's so important to have the veterans coming back and producing some really good new music. I mean, I only just got this yesterday. I had one listen through it, and I was like, wow, this is really good. Robin Trower, Joyful Sky, hooks up with this singer, Sari Shore, who's a tremendous talent. What a voice she has. At first, I was kind of leery. It's like, I don't know, Robin hooking up with kind of like a soulful, female singer. How's that going to sound? Is it going to be really mellow? Is it going to be laid back? This is fiery stuff. A, she's got a great voice, and B, Robin sounds rejuvenated. Robin's another one. Was he like 80? Right? Still playing with all the fire of when he was younger. And that's so good. And this sounds inspired. Thank you, Robin, for still continuing to do what you do. I mean, just absolutely amazing. We've got the most recent Yes. Say what you want about the Yes lineup and whatnot. They're still taking the time to go in and create new music, right? Why not? Jethro Tull is another one, right? Rock Float. I mean, just sounds like Jethro Tull to me. Is it ever going to compare to Aqualung, Songs from the Wood? No, because they're not 25, 30 years old anymore, right? But it still sounds like Jethro Tull. It still is enjoyable, right? And to me, it's inspiring that these guys are coming out and making new music. Cheap Trick, it's a fun album, right? Is it Dream Police or Heaven Tonight? Nah, not really, but it's still really good. I'd argue this is better than some of the stuff from the 80s and 90s that they put out. The Cult comes back, right? Solid record. Angel, right? Who would have thought Angel in the 2020s would put out an album that much fun? Alice Cooper, for crying out loud. Road is a terrific Alice Cooper record. There are lots of elements here that reminds me of some of the great stuff from the 70s and the late 80s, early 90s. Fun album. Hawkwind, for crying out loud. It's just classic sounding Hawkwind. Extreme comes back after many years with 6. Good, solid record. My buddy Kurt Vanderhoof and Metal Church. Congregation of Annihilation. What a great album this is. One of my favorite metal albums of the year. So good. Love him or hate him. This is not a bad Metallica album, right? They're trying to give the people what they want, right? The latest Winger. Terrific. Winger showing folks, hey, we're not just this hair metal band, right? We've always been a little bit different. We have a lot to offer. Just terrific, terrific album. Scorpions. After lots of stops and starts and almost retirements and some questionable albums in the late 90s and the 2000s, they come back with an album that sounds like prime early mid-80s Scorpions. Rock Believer. Saxon. Strong album. So late in their career. They've got a bunch of them, Accept is another one, right? Didn't pull theirs. Michael Schenker Group. Mr. Schenker. Still playing fantastic. Pumping out albums every 1 to 2 years. Styx, Crash of the Crown. Terrific album. They basically said, yeah, we're going to go back and we're going to kind of revisit our Crystal Ball, Grand Illusion era of the band. Awesome. Just hot off the presses. Vandenberg, Sin. Does it sound exactly like 80s Vandenberg? Not really. It sounds more like a really, really good Whitesnake album. And that's okay. Because, of course, Adrian played with Whitesnake for many years. And, why not? He's into that sort of thing. Not a big deal. So, you have all of these bands. And there's more. I just pulled out a bunch of our old veterans who have released albums over the last couple of years. And there's lots more examples than this. But how cool is it that these favorite artists of ours from 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago are still saying, hey, we can go out there and compete. We understand rock music maybe isn't at the top of everybody's, level of interest, but we still want to do it. We want you guys to hear our new music. We want to come out and play for you guys and play some of this new music. And I think that we're in a good position that we still have some of these old rockers doing this because, 10 years from now, a lot of these bands and artists and groups are not going to be doing this. So I think we should embrace it while they're still here, while they're still able and willing to do what they do and give us music that hopefully represents their illustrious back catalog and holds our interest. And yeah, do we expect any of these albums to all of a sudden be the greatest things that these bands have ever done? No. That I think it would be ridiculous of us to think that would be the case. But that doesn't mean we can't say, hey, that's a really strong album so late in the game from some of these bands. And I think, the reason why I did this show is all about this one. For the Rolling Stones to deliver an album this enjoyable so late in the game, that's really inspiring to me. And I think I always look forward to any time. I didn't grab it, but Uriah Heep is sitting right there. So Uriah Heep has delivered one of the great albums of this year, and that follows a line of 4 other albums that they've come out with over the last decade that have just been as good as a lot of the stuff that they released throughout their career. I mean, again, Uriah Heep has all these eras, right? Different vocalists and things like that. But I would put the Bernie Shaw, Phil Lanzon era of the band, and especially the last 5 albums, up against, you have your early 70s Heap classics. They will always be that. But I would put these more recent albums up against any other era of the band. And it possibly it's the second best. You have those first like 5 or 6 Heap albums. I would put these latest ones up right behind there as the strongest stuff in their catalog. That's saying something, right? That's basically saying that the early stuff is the absolute classic, but the real later stuff is classic era number 2, right? And not a lot of bands can do that, right? So I guess the moral of the story here is today, if you have a favorite band that you've loved for a long time, but maybe you just kind of stopped following them 10, 20 years ago or whatever, or you're not up on new stuff, don't forget about your favorites. And if they're still out there pumping out new music, please go give it a try. And embrace what they're trying to do, because they're trying to make money, but they're doing it for us. They're going the extra mile, trying to create magic once again. It's not always going to be absolute magic, but to me, a pretty good album from a band I've loved for 30, 40 years, I'm okay with that. I don't expect Led Zeppelin 4 again. I don't expect Heaven and Hell again. I don't expect Hotel California again. I don't expect Whitesnake 1987 again. Those are what they are. They'll never be replaced or passed. But something else new from some of these beloved bands that is pretty damn good, that's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. So thanks for watching, everybody. This is on the web at www.seeatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell to get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. So thanks in advance for all your support there. And we'll see you soon here with more stuff. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching. Embrace the legends, folks. They still have a lot to offer. Till next time, take care. Bye-bye.